2 days before the wedding, my fiancée told me she was visiting her aunt. At 4:12 a.m., I got a charge alert, luxury hotel, same city as her ex. I went there. The concierge said, she's in the spa. With him. 2 days before the ceremony, I was at my desk labeling place cards and double-checking the seating chart. The quiet felt artificial. It was the kind of quiet that asks for proof. She had said she was driving out to visit her aunt, an easy trip and a familiar excuse. I told myself to keep my hands busy and let the hours pass. At 4:12 a.m., my phone vibrated with a card alert. High-end hotel, downtown, 3 charges in a row within 8 minutes. I did not guess. I read the hotel name twice, opened the map, and placed a pin. The ex lived 6 blocks from that lobby. I dressed without turning on any lights. The street outside carried the gray color that comes right before sunrise, when everything looks honest and tired. The drive took 13 minutes. I parked in a delivery slot and walked in with the casual confidence of someone who had already been there a dozen times. The lobby smelled like polished wood and eucalyptus. A night clerk pretended his coffee was not cold. I asked for a manager because managers have routines and templates, and routines push people to reveal things they do not realize they are revealing. The concierge came out instead, thin tie, careful posture, the kind of person who softens refusals with hospitality words. I asked if there was a spa on site. He nodded, then glanced down at a monitor. I said I needed to confirm whether my fiancée had an appointment today because she had left her allergy medicine with me. I offered the first 3 letters of her name. He asked me to wait. His eyes moved across the screen in the way eyes move when they recognize something they should not say out loud. He swallowed. Then he said the sentence that closed the space between suspicion and fact. She was in the spa. With him. The spa opened 24 hours for guests. On the hallway wall, a printed sign listed available late-night couples packages, a detail I might have laughed at last week. I thanked the concierge and stepped away, as if the matter was settled. It was not the time for a loud scene. It was time for a file. Evidence does not collect itself. It requires a timeline and good habits. I sat in a lobby chair and wrote a basic outline on my phone. 3:52 a.m. Authorization request. For 12 a.m. Posted charge. Cross-check with camera presence in lobby, if possible. Cross-check with rideshare logs. She had left earlier claiming the drive would take 3 hours because she would avoid the highway. She preferred to decorate excuses with extra details. I opened our shared budgeting app and tapped the hotel entry to see the merchant category code, then saved a screenshot. The app timestamped the authorization to the minute. I marked the second and third charges as probable spa add-ons, based on the amounts. I phoned the number listed for the spa from the lobby couch. A recorded message confirmed the overnight desk and said walk-ins could check availability at the counter. That told me their traffic was low enough at this hour to know names. I lowered the phone and watched the elevator. At 4:21, a tall guy in a robe and hotel slippers walked across the carpet carrying a paper water cup. I recognized the shoulders and haircut from photos I had pretended not to study when she swore their history had cooled into something ordinary. He did not look around. He took the turn toward the spa, pushing the frosted glass door with the lazy entitlement of someone used to service. I took a photo of the hallway clock that read 4:22 and a second photo of the frosted door with the spa logo. I made sure the angles were level. Every photo that looks accidental becomes easier to dismiss. I placed my phone flat on my thigh and opened the voice memo app, not for an argument, but for a record of ambient sound. The spa door opened again. Soft laughter floated out like perfume from a spilled bottle. The door eased shut. The memo captured the door hiss and the noise level. It was not much. It was something. Confrontation produces drama and very little proof. Investigation produces proof and very little drama. I chose the latter. I stood and walked to the hotel's small business center. The printer sat unused with a polite sign that promised 10 free pages for guests. I did not need paper. I needed the guest browser with unfiltered access to the hotel's public website. The booking portal listed romance essentials, with specific package names that matched the charge amounts on my phone within a small margin. One line item included a couple's suite reservation window from 3:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. I took a screenshot and mailed it to myself with the subject line, menu correlation. The camera above the lobby elevators was not mine to pull, but cameras are managed by people, and people are managed by stories. I returned to the concierge and told him the truth he could safely hear. My wedding was in 2 days. I believe my fiancée was here with someone who should not be here. I was not going to make a scene. I needed to know how early the spa had opened for them. I did not ask for names. I asked for times. Times are less protected by privacy rules because times are considered harmless. He watched my face for 10 long seconds. Then he said the spa had taken a couple's booking at 3:30 a.m. He added that it was the second visit this month. He should not have said that last part. He had said it anyway. I thanked him and placed a folded bill on the desk. He pushed it back with 2 fingers. He did not want a tip to ride over the quiet kindness he had chosen. I respected that and left it on the counter anyway. He looked down at it like it was a problem he would solve after I walked away. I stepped outside to the curb, breathed in the cool air, and opened her location sharing. It had been off for 2 days. She had said her battery kept dying because navigation drained it. My car still had the emergency GPS tracker the insurance company required. I could not place her phone, but I could place my vehicle logs. 2 night drives downtown this month, both between 3 and 5 a.m., both with 1 stop within a block of this hotel. The log did not lie. I took another screenshot and saved it to a folder labeled Friday. I needed more than timelines to make this airtight. I needed a financial thread I could pull in front of people who would not argue with eyes and hearsay. I checked our joint account again and noticed a small gift card purchase from the hotel's e-commerce portal 3 days ago, routed through a payment processor with a neutral name. It had looked like any other boutique charge. The amount matched the couple's package within a few dollars after tax. I opened the transaction, tapped details, and saw the merchant descriptor string that included a code used only for hotel ancillary services. It was not definitive, but it connected the dots. She had used our account to buy the gift card. He had likely redeemed it in person. They had turned our joint balance into aromatherapy and dim lights. I scanned the curb for his car. He drove an older coupe that held together out of habit more than maintenance. He had taken a rideshare. The hotel's driveway camera would show that if anyone asked with authority. I did not have that authority yet. I could get it through people who did, or I could find a crack somewhere else. There is always a crack. I went back inside and bought a bottle of water at the lobby bar. The bartender on duty kept the register open while he restocked lemons. A small thermal printer behind the counter spit out order chits for minibar restocks and spa bar tabs. One fluttered to the floor. I did not touch it. I watched the bartender pick it up and read it before tucking it into a stack. He slid the stack into a plastic sleeve marked with today's date. The top slip showed partial text. I read upside down the words, Rose Bath, and an amount that matched my earlier screenshot. I did not take the slip. I did not need to. I had the numbers already. The side of the printer acting out the same story made the data feel human, which would matter later when the room went quiet and people tried to argue the definition of a mistake. At 4:58 a.m., the spa door opened again. He walked out first, still in the robe. She followed a few steps behind, hair up, bare face, my ring on a chain around her neck instead of her finger. That detail sat like a nail driven too deep to pull with fingers. I kept my seat and shifted the phone to camera mode with the volume shutter turned off. 2 frames were clean enough to identify both, without faces aimed my way. His profile was sharp and familiar. Her posture was the posture of someone stepping around the last pebble of guilt she was willing to feel. They took the elevator up, not down. I checked the hotel website again and saw that the couple's package included an optional nap extension. I recorded that line with a screen capture as well, because judges do not care about romance language, but they care about invoice language. They did not come back down for 40 minutes. When the elevator doors opened again, he wore jeans and a jacket. She wore the dress she had left in, the one she had said would be comfortable for a highway drive. He walked ahead. She checked her phone with a small smirk I had seen before when she thought she had solved a problem. He held the door for her without looking back. They separated at the curb to call separate rides. The distance between them looked practiced. I did not speak to her. I did not speak to him. I watched each car pull away and recorded the ride numbers from the back windows. Those codes are linked to driver records. Drivers remember faces for tips. Each piece created a corridor I could walk later when I needed more voices than mine. Back home, the apartment still smelled like the candle she had lit before she left. The seating chart waited on the table like a joke with an expensive punchline. I put it away. The next steps needed to be clean. I copied the screenshots to a hidden folder. I backed up my phone. I wrote a formal timeline with locations and amounts. I drew small boxes next to each item for proof status. Captured, to be confirmed, witness available, paper trail pending. Lines that had felt like a panic attack at 4:12 a.m. now looked like a spreadsheet. The line at the bottom said what mattered most. I had enough to stop the wedding without doubt. I wanted more than a stoppage. I wanted the truth to reveal itself with no room for a rewrite. Before sleeping, I called her aunt. She answered on the second ring. The voice sounded groggy, but clear enough to know she had not hosted anyone. She said she had not seen my fiancé in months. She asked if something was wrong. I said the schedule had changed and I would call later. I ended the call and added the time and her words to the timeline. The air felt colder. Cold was useful. Cold makes plans that hold. By the time the sky turned bright, I had an outline for the day. Verify rideshare drop-offs through driver outreach. Confirm the gift card redemption through a polite email to the hotel asking whether a misplaced confirmation number could be resent, attached to my card digits, framed as a receipt request for expense documentation. Visit the jeweler to resize the ring back to its original purchase diameter and ask for a time-stamped inspection note. People pay attention to documents, and documents do not blush. The part one had not planned arrived as I walked to the sink with the ring box. When I opened it, the velvet cradle was empty. She had left with the ring on a chain and had not returned it to its home. I checked the vanity tray and the bowl where she tossed earrings. Nothing. The loss was not sentimental. It was tactical. If she had moved the ring to a chain days ago, she had been preparing a variation on her story. She would say the ring had felt loose. She would say she had wanted to keep it close to her heart. She would use that line to dress up a midnight spa with a man she had called a closed chapter. My plan needed to anticipate that line and cut it short. I closed the empty box and wrote one more line on the timeline. Ring transferred to chain prior to visit, observed at 4:58 a.m. That detail was my mind changer. Not because of the symbolism, because of intent. People who move rings from fingers to chains are rehearsing for a switch they plan to make permanent. I turned off the kitchen light and watched the apartment settle. The day would not be generous. It would be useful. I was ready for useful. By mid-morning, the city had moved into its weekday rhythm, and I was already 3 steps ahead of hers. Marina would be sleeping in, that much I could predict. The spa's nap extension ended at 6 a.m., which meant she probably didn't get home before sunrise. I kept my phone volume low in case she texted. She didn't. That told me she was either waiting to see if I had noticed her absence or she thought she had pulled it off without raising suspicion. Both options worked in my favor. The first move was to trace her rideshare from the hotel. I had noted the trip ID number off the car's sticker. A quick search led me to the driver's name through a rideshare help forum I'd used in a past dispute. Drivers rarely refuse to talk when you open with the right tone. Curious, polite, and slightly confused, as if you're trying to track down a misplaced bag. I sent him a message explaining I believed a passenger might have left something valuable in his back seat and asked when and where he had picked her up. He replied in under 10 minutes. 4:59 a.m., downtown hotel, drop-off at a residential street in the next borough over. The location wasn't ours. That meant she didn't even come home after the hotel. I marked the address and cross-referenced it with the ex's known hangouts. It wasn't his apartment, but it was only 3 blocks away. Likely a friend of his or a short-term rental. The second move was financial. The gift card purchase I had flagged the night before had been processed through the hotel's payment system. That meant it would be logged against a specific booking reference number. I emailed the hotel's accounting department, saying I needed a receipt for reimbursement purposes and attached a partial card number. I claimed I'd misplaced the confirmation email. Within an hour, a polite front desk staffer sent back a PDF receipt, complete with a note. Couple's moonlight retreat, redeemed on-site at 3:34 a.m., April 12th. That timestamp sat neatly in my growing chain of evidence. The third move was more delicate, her phone records. She wasn't careless enough to leave her phone lying around unlocked anymore, but I still had access to our shared phone bill. A login later, I was staring at a month's worth of call and text history. His number appeared 19 times in the past 3 weeks, with several calls stretching past an hour, always between midnight and 2 in the morning. There were also short bursts of calls in the afternoons, followed by gaps of silence. Those gaps lined up with the times she claimed she was at dress fittings or running errands. I downloaded the entire CSV and tucked it into the folder I now had labeled Wedding, Private. Her alibi about visiting her aunt had already been broken in part 1, but I wanted to see what she would tell me today. Around noon, she sent a single text. Just got back, exhausted. Going to rest. We still on for the caterer at 3? I told her yes, keeping my tone neutral. The less she suspected, the more she'd keep moving into my net. The next layer came from following her movements again. I parked 2 streets over from her building in my neighbor's old hatchback, the kind of car no one notices. At 2:15 p.m., she left in casual clothes and headed not toward the caterer, but toward a small cafe tucked near the edge of the business district. I stayed far enough back to blend with the foot traffic. Inside, she joined a woman I recognized as her co-worker from the design firm, one who had a reputation for knowing too much about everyone. I slid into a corner seat with a view, but without catching their eyes. What I caught instead was tone and body language. Marina leaned forward, lowered her voice, and smirked in a way that didn't belong to any conversation about floral arrangements. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught phrases, "He'll be fine, not forever, just until something better lines up." The coworker laughed, covering her mouth. Marina added something about making it work for now and keeping him happy until it's time. I didn't need every syllable. I had the shape of it. This wasn't a slip or a moment of weakness. This was calculation. By the time she left, I was no longer chasing suspicion. I was building a case. She didn't see me as she walked toward the subway. I stayed in the cafe, typed what I'd heard into my notes, and emailed it to myself. Memory fades under pressure. A time-stamped email doesn't. The next phase meant locking down witness support. I called my friend Adrian, who worked security at a mid-tier law firm. He owed me a favor from the year before when I helped him out of a contract mess. Adrian had a side connection to a tech guy who could, in his words, pull a camera feed without ringing the wrong bells. I gave him the hotel's address, lobby camera location, and time window between 4:15 and 5 a.m. He said he'd have still frames for me by tomorrow, no promises on video. That was enough. A single still showing her and Victor in that lobby at the right time would be the nail. Before heading home, I passed by the ex's building. His car was parked out front now, freshly washed. A woman I didn't recognize stepped out of the lobby, holding a paper bag of takeout, and glanced around like she was checking for someone. I jotted down her description and the time, possible friend, possible decoy. This could be a tangle of people covering for each other, and I needed to keep my line straight. Back home, Marina acted as if nothing had happened. She chatted about color schemes, about the DJ set list, even scrolled through photos of the reception hall on her phone as if she had been invested all week. I watched her talk, memorizing the ease in her voice. That ease would fracture soon enough. By nightfall, my folder had grown. PDF hotel receipt with timestamp. Rideshare pickup and drop-off details. CSV of her calls with Victor. Notes from the cafe conversation. Aunt's statement from the night before. Planned stills from the hotel lobby camera. The investigation wasn't about whether she had betrayed me anymore. That was already proven. The real question was how to reveal it so there would be no doubt, no spin, no rescue narrative from her friends or family. That night, I lay in bed, listening to her steady breathing beside me. She thought the game was under her control. She didn't realize I'd stopped being a participant and started being the architect. Tomorrow, I'd move from gathering proof to setting the trap. By the time the sun rose, the evidence was no longer my priority. Presentation was. Proof without an audience could be swept under the rug. The kind of people who excused Marina's behavior would call it a misunderstanding unless they saw it arranged in a way that stripped out every escape route. That meant timing, witnesses, and a setting she couldn't control. The first step was her father. We had never been close, but I knew where he stood on loyalty. He was funding nearly half of the wedding, venue deposit, catering, part of the honeymoon, and his business reputation mattered to him more than sentiment. I called him mid-morning and told him we needed to meet alone. We agreed on a coffee shop near his office. I brought only my phone, a printed copy of the hotel receipt, and the CSV log of her calls with Victor. He was already seated when I walked in, tapping through emails. I sat down, slid the envelope across the table, and said nothing until he opened it. His eyes didn't flicker until he reached the timestamp on the hotel receipt. That was when his jaw tightened. He flipped to the phone record printout, scanning the late-night calls. I didn't embellish. I told him she had been at the hotel with her ex, that it wasn't the first time, and that she was using my money and his to facilitate it. He asked one question, "Do you have more?" I told him about the rideshare drop-off, the cafe conversation, the upcoming security stills. His fingers tapped once against the table. Then he leaned in and said we should handle this quietly but decisively. He didn't want his money burned on a fraud. That was his exact phrasing. I told him I was planning to expose it before the wedding in a way that made it impossible for her to flip the story. He agreed to help, under one condition. She had to admit it in front of others, or the evidence had to be displayed in such a way that no one could claim manipulation. We chose the rehearsal dinner. It was set for the next evening at a private dining room in a riverside restaurant. She would expect nothing but speeches and laughter. He would make sure every guest worth convincing was present, close relatives, bridesmaids, groomsmen, and a few of his own associates. My second call was to Adrian. The hotel lobby stills were ready. He sent me 3 clean shots. One of her walking in behind Victor at 3:29 a.m., one of them side by side at the spa entrance, and one of them leaving together 40 minutes later. Their faces were clear, the timestamps visible in the bottom corner. That was the visual confirmation her father had wanted. The third step was bait for Victor. I needed him in the same room as her when the truth came out. A direct invite would spook him, so I had to use a pretext. Through a mutual acquaintance, an old college friend of mine who once played poker with him, I arranged for Victor to think he was meeting someone at the same restaurant about a potential freelance consulting opportunity. It was vague enough to get him to show up, but official enough to make him dress well and arrive on time. The meeting was set for the exact hour of the rehearsal dinner. To ensure he walked into our section, I asked the maitre d' to seat him there by mistake, before his supposed meeting. The restaurant's layout made this easy. The private dining area had a single entry from the main floor. He would walk in expecting to see his contact and instead see Marina, dressed for the rehearsal, surrounded by family, under the gaze of her father. While those arrangements clicked into place, I added a silent weapon, the slideshow. Marina had insisted on a photo montage for the dinner. I told the AV tech that I'd supply the files directly because I wanted to surprise her with a few extra pictures. He gave me the access code to the presentation laptop. I built a sequence that began with our engagement photos, then our vacation shots, and at the 20-second mark transitioned without warning to the hotel receipt, the CSV call log, and finally the security stills. All formatted cleanly, no commentary. Facts speak louder when they're left alone. By late afternoon, Marina still hadn't suspected anything. She was busy texting the bridesmaids about hair appointments and sending me reminders about the cake tasting. I agreed to everything, keeping my responses short and agreeable. The less change she noticed in my behavior, the more likely she would walk right into the setup. That night, I ran a final check with her father. He had already informed the restaurant to expect a special announcement during dessert. The staff was briefed to dim the lights when cued and run the slideshow exactly as given. He would open with a short toast, then I would take over. If she tried to leave, the layout meant she'd have to pass Victor in the doorway. I went to bed earlier than usual, leaving her in the living room chatting on the phone, likely with one of her trusted friends who thought they knew the whole picture. I wasn't listening for content anymore. I was listening for tone. And her tone was still confident, still untouchable. By the next evening, that tone would be gone. The next evening arrived with the kind of stillness you feel before a storm. The rehearsal dinner was set for 7. By 6:30, the private dining room at the Riverside restaurant was already filling with people. The clink of glassware mixed with polite conversation. Marina was in her element, circulating between tables, touching shoulders, smiling like someone whose life was firmly under control. Her father arrived precisely at 6:50, nodded to me once, and headed to speak with the maitre d'. That was my signal everything was ready. In the corner, the AV tech had the slideshow queued. The restaurant staff moved with an unspoken awareness. Plates being placed, wine poured, lights adjusted just slightly dimmer than usual. At 7:05, the door opened, and Victor stepped in. He was dressed in a dark jacket, looking around for his supposed contact. The maitre d', right on cue, guided him toward our section, gesturing to a seat near the far side of the long table. He caught sight of Marina before she saw him. He hesitated mid-step, but the sight of her father standing near the head of the table froze him. There was no easy exit without making a scene. When Marina finally noticed him, the shift in her expression was small but sharp. Her smile flickered, her eyes narrowed, and she straightened her posture. She tried to mask it by turning toward a bridesmaid, but the damage was done. Her father had seen it. After the main course, her father stood. He began with the kind of toast expected at these events, about family, about beginnings, about trust. Then he paused, glanced at me, and stepped aside. I rose, thanked everyone for coming, and said that before the wedding, there was something important to share. The AV tech dimmed the lights and started the slideshow. The first images were harmless: vacations, celebrations, laughing moments. People smiled. Marina kept her hands folded neatly in her lap. Then the next slide appeared, the hotel receipt, clear as print on a contract, timestamp visible. Murmurs began immediately. The next slide showed the CSV log of late-night calls to Victor's number. Names were redacted, but the pattern was obvious. Marina's fingers tightened around the edge of the tablecloth. Then came the still frame from the hotel lobby camera. Marina walking in behind Victor at 3:29 a.m., both in plain view. The second frame, them at the spa entrance. The third, them leaving together. The room's noise shifted from polite confusion to stunned silence. Marina's mother's face drained of color. Her father didn't move. Marina's first reaction was to stand. She reached for her phone as if she could somehow undo the screen in front of her. But the layout worked against her. Victor was by the only exit. And when her eyes met his, whatever alibi she might have planned collapsed. Her father spoke before she could. He told her she was done. No more wedding. No more funding. No more access to the accounts he'd been covering for her. He turned to Victor and told him to leave before the police became involved for the unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account. Victor swore under his breath and left without looking back. Marina tried to speak to her father, but he cut her off and walked out as well, telling her she could collect her belongings from his house by the weekend. The guests began to leave in clusters, avoiding her. The maitre d' quietly informed her that the venue was canceling the wedding reservation effective immediately, with penalties due in full. Since her father was no longer covering it, the cost was hers alone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I thanked the remaining guests for coming, stepped away from the table, and left her standing in the middle of the room with no ring, no venue, no fiancé, no financial lifeline. By the next morning, word had spread. The bridesmaids group chat was silent except for one message from her closest friend, asking how she planned to cover the penalties and whether she'd found a place to stay. She hadn't. She sent me a single text later that day. "You didn't have to do it like that." I didn't reply. The facts were public, the money trail was documented, and the people she relied on for cover had seen everything themselves. There was nothing left for her to twist. The wedding had been erased, but the record was permanent.
And that stays that way until the effect of this reaction wears off. And that's when you get this idea of like, what did I do last night? I started having to get told because I couldn't remember. And I was like, what? Who would do that? I would do that. And I just couldn't get around that. And look, I'm a stubborn white Australian guy, and I think I was 22 the first time someone said, "You really need to kind of watch. Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" was the question.